So today we've got a really, really special video and person with us, and I'm really, really delighted to introduce you to a special woman called Prisha, who joins us from America. And Prisha, look, yours is, if I may say, an especially harrowing and upsetting story, and I'm really, really delighted that you agreed to join me today. And I was incredibly drawn to it. I've looked at your YouTube channel, which we can put in the link. So I hope people follow you on your journey. As a child, you had an especially difficult childhood, which I think it was really stolen and left you with lifelong mental and physical scars, I think it's fair to say. And although I find all detransitioner stories incredibly moving and insightful, I think your background of trauma and abuse really touched and resonated with me. And also the fact that your reflections, are so poignant, as well as, from your childhood to the medical interventions through to sort of, identifying as trans through to your kind of your detransition. So maybe you can kind of start us off and share a bit about this kind of story from childhood through and what kind of got you started, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so like as you mentioned, there was a lot of trauma and some abuse and stuff. And so I due to that, and also just hereditary mental illness, I did not feel good about myself and I didn't feel good like any of the time. Um, by the time I was 12, actually, I was suicidal most of the time. And by like 13, I was actively trying. So, yeah, when I was at my worst, that was when I did find the trans community. And, they told me literally that all of my problems were because I was born in the wrong body, and that if I aligned myself and made it so that I was in the correct body, everything would be cured. Like I was really told and convinced that I had finally found the cure for what was wrong. And I just wanted to fix myself and not feel that way anymore.
Mm. I mean, I mean, it's astonishing, and then there's a whole package that kind of goes along with that. Start us off at the beginning, because I know that there's a real acute timeline to where they started, because you were incredibly young at this point, but there was quite a big backstory with your childhood and what was going on in the home, wasn't there? And that was some of the parts that I found resonated especially with me, because I have kind of some shared experiences with you.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I do feel like a lot of my bad experiences did lead me down this path, and one of those was a sexual assault when I was 14 by someone who was older than me. And I also did not receive a sex education. And I feel like that negatively impacted me as well, and probably negatively impacts a lot of girls. But like when the assault happened, like I wasn't even aware of what was going on until it was like halfway through. Um and then my mother suffered a lot of abuse when she grew up, and that caused her to abuse drugs and alcohol when I was growing up. So even while I was having all of these problems like the assault and the eating disorder and the declining mental health, like her problems were just louder.
Mm.
So I wasn't getting the attention I needed. So when the trans community did give me attention, I really latched onto it because I needed it.
Mm.
It just
And
started coming from the wrong place.
so the chaos of because I remember you saying about the alcoholism that was going on within the family, and because I have some experience of that from my own childhood, and I know that that is something which has stayed with me for the whole of my life, and it's
Mm.
affected me. It's pretty much mapped out the whole of my adult kind of trajectory in terms of who I am. So I can imagine that that had quite a big bearing on you adapting into, you know, through puberty and into early adulthood. Um, and you know, in terms of what was going on in the family, I know you had siblings, but um, there must have been quite a lot of chaos, and you must have felt a bit alone. And so, did you kind of move towards, because you had the internet, obviously, at that point?
Yes.
Um, and I know that you mentioned also about some negative issues around messaging that you had around developing as a woman, a young woman, and messaging about feeling unattractive, etc., and maybe not having female role models.
Oh yeah.
I mean, can you sort of talk a bit more about what that felt like or what was going on?
Yeah, I didn't really have any female role models. My parents were really religious, so I couldn't watch a lot of TV. Like I wasn't watching any of the things my peers were watching, and I also didn't really have peers. Um, and like the only women in my life were my mother and my grandmother and a couple of my aunts, but we moved away. And like all of them had histories of eating disorders or body dysmorphia that was diagnosed and stuff. So I mean, that was modeled to me from a very early age. You know, I watched my mother hate her own body and not eat. And I was never, you know, taught really anything positive or good about being a woman. It was always a hard thing and a bad thing and a negative thing, and like you're a victim and you're a servant and you're less than and all of that. So being a woman was never like a very attractive idea anyway.
So she was a servant to maybe your father, or she was sort of displaying some kind of victimhood within the dynamic in the family, you mean?
Yeah,
That's what you
I
were
mean, my
saying.
dad certainly didn't enforce that. He wasn't that way, but my mom, you know, like had this whole hierarchy that like God had laid out about like how God is here and then the husband is here and then the wife is here below him and then the children are at the bottom. Like, and it's just like a hierarchy and everyone is treated that way. Like you're treated as if you're less than whoever's above you.
Right.
Which was very toxic.
So if you were, I mean, eating disorders are often about finding an internal locus of control.
Yes.
Um, and I think one of the key things about alcoholism is, certainly from my experience, you're an observer in a situation which is incredibly frightening and out of control. So it's not surprising to me that you kind of retreated into some things that you could become in control of, because some of the mental health things that you've talked about are, you know, really, really do make sense along those lines. One of the things that I did hear you talk about somewhere, which I thought, you know, it interested me, was your kind of idea about transitioning was about being a boy, but not about being a man.
Hmm.
That jumped out at me, and I wondered how, whether or not that was because obviously you weren't kind of thinking about long all the way down the line, but I wondered whether or not there was a sort of childhood part of you that thought if you had been a boy in that situation as a child, whether your life would have been different in that family dynamic as opposed to being a young girl. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of that, but yeah, I never imagined myself as a man or grizzly or anything. I just wanted to be a boy. That really is true. And I was so like naive that when the sexual assault happened, I thought that only happened to girls. Um, so that was another reason I wanted to be a boy. Um, and you know, I just never really saw myself as a man, but I mean, I can't really say I ever saw myself as a woman either, you know, because that was never really modeled to me or something I looked forward to. So it wasn't like something I felt like I was losing until I actually didn't have it and couldn't experience it.
Right. So at the age of around at 15, you started the process. You got into the mindset that you were trans. So what was the initial lead up to that? So you had messaging on from online sources. Was that also at school, or what was the lead up to that?
I was being homeschooled at the time. I actually think it would have happened a lot faster had I been going to school. But so it was just people online, and then eventually I found a gender expert, a transgender expert, she called herself. And she just affirmed me right away. And I found a transgender group that I started communicating with a lot, and they affirmed me, over and over again every single week.
Mm,
But it really started just going online and finding people saying like, oh, you hate your period, that means you're a boy. Oh, you hate this, that means you're a boy. You don't get along with other girls. Other girls don't like you, you're a boy. Like, and like even things that I can look back, like one example, my eating disorder was so bad that I started growing hair all over my body because I couldn't regulate my body temperature. And I thought, like, I posted that online and people told me like, yeah, that's like your body like affirming itself and like trying to be a boy and like
mm,
all this crazy stuff.
yeah. What sort of online platforms were you using at the time? What was happening at school as well? What was that kind of intersection like?
So I went to school for sixth grade and seventh grade and then half of ninth grade. But
Yeah,
in ninth grade, I had to be taken out because
that
I
was the
was
bit
like
where you
really
stepped out. Yeah.
suicidal. Yeah. But I was on the internet like nonstop for years, without a break. Um, so I was in constant communication with like the trans community and stuff and being told these delusional things, all the time and deluding myself, you know what I mean? But the website I was on was Tumblr. It's
Mm,
not really around anymore, but it was like a blog. Um, and one of the issues as well was that I actually had like quite a lot of followers on there. Um, I'm not sure why. I mean, you get a lot of attention for being trans and transitioning, so that's probably part of why I had so many followers. But a lot of people encouraging me and putting this stuff in my head and telling me it every day.
I'm sure. Because in the UK, the homeschooling community is quite awash with the trans ideology. Because whilst they are doing, it appears that they're perhaps safe at home. Actually, obviously, they're interacting with one another in on platforms, but also they meet in social groups.
Mm,
It's a kind of different version of schooling. Um,
yeah.
so then you got into the medical side of it at 16, didn't you? What happened at
Ah,
that point? Was it around there?
yes. And I started Depo at 16, like Depo Provera, and then the testosterone started at 17.
Right.
Yes. And the first time I started my testosterone, I had gained a little bit of weight, which caused me to start my period. And that made me feel really uncomfortable. It made me feel fat. And but my doctor told me that it was making me feel dysphoric and that it meant I was a boy because I was uncomfortable with my period. And that was the day I started testosterone.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I take it you got the kind of natural lift, elevation from the testosterone, which made you feel better in kind of mood and, um, gave you a bit of a boost.
Oh yeah. And I mean another thing was that it really increased my appetite, which made me think I was being cured of my eating disorder.
Right.
Which I took as like more affirmation. Like it's like self-fulfilling prophecies, you really cherry pick and delude yourself.
Mm.
But I was really desperate for a cure and desperate to get better and to see the good in things, so it didn't feel delusional.
Mm. And at that point, you got fairly quickly into it. And I'm not sure at that point, because I know that you spoke about the fact that you left home and you got into some, which sounded pretty much like a kind of grooming experience, where you moved in with. Maybe you can kind of talk about that rather than me tell your story, but you moved in with your rainbow family, didn't you? And then
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
what happened there?
I it was shortly after my top surgery, my double mastectomy, and things were just like really awful in my family. We weren't getting along well. My parents were really upset all the time. I was still suicidal and frustrated with that fact because I had had my top surgery now and still felt that way. And then I found someone online who affirmed me, and we truly trauma bonded. Um and I just really quickly moved in with them. Like, I went visit them in Florida, and I was supposed to go back home, and I just never got on the plane back. I just stayed because honestly it was quieter there because there wasn't drug and alcohol abuse happening. So
Mm, mm. Which is just incredibly is one of the most difficult things to live with on a daily
yeah,
basis.
yeah,
It sends
every
you
day.
into, it's, yeah, almost unbearable. And you you said about that these people, that there was a sort of grooming level of the family that you were living with, where there was a group called, I can't remember what you called them,
Yeah, they called themselves the Horde.
horde, that's right. um
Yeah, and they just told me like, all of these people who were now like very young adults had been like taken in as teenagers because like their parents like were problematic or something. I didn't have the whole story, but like all of them were different versions of LGBT.
right. And you slept underneath a kitchen table?
Yeah, actually, not a kitchen table, a little like art table, like a small craft table. So it only went over my upper half, like it covered my face to my stomach, so I'd like be secure under the table.
Right. Which and your parents had something in their minds, what, that they were kind of perhaps getting messaging like, well, would you rather have an alive son or a dead daughter type of
Oh
thing?
yeah.
So they kind of thought, well, we'll let her go because this is better in some way. Was that the kind of
Yeah.
idea?
I mean, I had already attempted suicide more than once, and my cutting was like really getting out of hand. And the doctors were literally like, she or he is going to go through with it, if you don't affirm him and, do exactly what he says and wants.
Right.
So I mean, I think they were really manipulated. And I mean, when a doctor tells you something, you trust them. And I mean, I they clearly had a sick child. You know what I mean? Something was very wrong.
Mm,
Um, and the doctors said it was being trans. The doctors said I was born in the wrong body. So
mhm,
we all wanted to fix it, even though like my mom didn't believe it, but I didn't listen to her because of her choices. Like, I was resentful, and also I just figured she didn't know what she was talking about.
mhm,
But that sucks. But I just wasn't mature enough, and she had made choices that put a rift between us. So I didn't listen. But yeah, they were literally told that if this I wasn't medicalized, I would die.
mhm. um One of the things that I found incredibly, I mean, this, to be fair, there's many things I find sad about your tale, but one of the things that particularly I identified with, you said that your friends, people didn't want to interact with you when you were young because of your alcoholic father. They didn't want to hang out with you um, because of the alcoholism in your family, which kind of further served to isolate you, which I
Oh yeah.
found particularly difficult to hear because I recognize that as something from my own childhood. Um, I mean, just sort of think moving into your kind of, the mental illness, because a lot of this is, you can't separate out the mental illness from the abuse, because they're layer upon layer, aren't they? And I know that you then went on to get this kind of borderline personality disorder diagnosis. I mean, and I know that you're also incredibly reflective and informed because you want to become a counsellor. So can you sort of talk to me about some of those kind of facets that you think? What's your reflections on that? How that went down?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do think that the childhood trauma and the mental illness go hand in hand. I mean, I will say that I think there's some of it running in the family too, like it's a generational thing because my mother also has her mental illnesses and then so does her mother. But you know, the abuse went down the generations too.
Mm,
Um Oh, so I like when you're a child and your brain has to focus on just surviving, um, like it literally doesn't grow right. And that's what happened.
mm,
Like with the BPD, my amygdala, which is located in the very bottom of the back of the brain and is sort of like your lizard brain, like your survival brain, it is too small. And then my frontal lobe is also too small and overactive.
mm. So did you have quite a lot of emotional kind of outburst type of activity? I mean, was it quite a kind of chaotic thing? Can you imagine if you were living with yourself, if you would you have done it differently if you had been your own parent?
I mean, I don't know what I would have done because I don't have a child that age, so it's so hard to imagine. But I mean, I wish honestly they would have like just strapped me to my bed and locked me up, like anything to prevent more mutilation. You know what I mean? Like I feel like doing that would have been the same as the way they like took the knives and weapons out of the house and stuff. Like to protect me. Like I literally wish they had chained me to my bed. I wouldn't be mad at them now if they had. I would have been angry then, but like literally anything to stop me would have been worth it. But I mean, I understand why they didn't. That's not exactly legal and ethical, but I just I don't know. Anything.
I mean, it probably doesn't surprise you to know that I speak to many parents dealing with ROGD kids who are in the same boat as you're talking about, with young people who are self-harming, have got kind of multiple mental health, you know, layer upon layer of of complexities, and the parents literally just don't know what to do for the right thing, and there's the tensions, and they are literally times hundreds, and they don't know what to do for the best, really. I guess
So,
that's why they would love to, they'll be interested to hear your story.
yeah, one thing I will say is I felt objectified and almost, and this is because of my trauma, sexualized by my parents when they showed an attachment to my female gender. So I think that the message when you're talking to your children shouldn't be, oh, I want my little girl, I want my little boy. That sounds selfish. And I mean, there is a place for those feelings. Like I get it. I can only imagine. Um, but like your child is not the one to share those feelings with. So when you're talking to your child and you're trying to tell them the reasons you don't want them, again, it's not because you want your little boy or your little girl. You will actually love them as either gender, but you don't want them to regret it. You don't want them to medicalize themselves. You don't want them to hurt themselves. You don't want this to be an escape. It's not because you won't love a son or you won't love a daughter. It's not because, you need to have whatever gender they were born as. It's because you don't want them to become a lifelong medical patient. Even if they are trans, they're going to be a lifelong medical patient, even if everything goes right. So, God forbid things not be right. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's just not something you can sign up for as a child. I think that trans people deserve to do it like healthy. Like if you're going to be trans, you deserve to have had therapy for like years before, and you deserve to be an adult so you can be a good man or a good woman. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, like you're not gonna, even if you are actually trans, whatever that is, you're not gonna be a good man or a good woman if you do it in a bad place out of trauma. You know what I mean?
Right. Do you think that that everyone inherently has a gender identity?
Um, wow. I think everyone is either a man or a woman. As far as gender identity, I don't even know if I really believe in it. Like, gender identity is just in a culmination of stereotypes. You know what I mean? And like that changes depending on how old you are and where you are in the globe. You know what I mean? Like in other countries, it's feminine to cook, and then in other countries, the men cook. You know what I mean? Like, so you can't say I'm a man or a woman based on what you do and how you act. You know?
Mm. Um, one of the things that you talked about before, which was interesting, was about cults. And obviously, I'm saying all these things like you said it 5 minutes ago, but it's because I've literally listened to all the other recordings that you've done, which have absolutely fascinated me. Your story is incredible, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing. And I know it's difficult for you to share all this information, but one of the things you said was that people need to learn about cults, and I thought that that was really important, right? And that was an important message that you wanted to share with parents. You said you need to learn about what your children are learning about, and what the cults are exposing them to. And you talked about love bombing and about brainwashing and about social conditioning. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what that kind of experience was like and what they did to you and what they were saying with you, what your message would be?
Yes. So, cults use information control and emotional control and social control to brainwash you and manipulate you mentally and emotionally into behaving and believing a certain way. And indoctrination starts with love bombing, wherein they make you feel very special and included because you're part of the cult, and then they also get you addicted to that so that when they stop they can like feed it to you in little increments, so that if you start straying or something they can love bomb you again and then you don't do it, or if you're not acting right they can withhold it and it can become like a reward exchange system. So love bombing is really 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 toxic, and narcissists will love bomb partners to manipulate them. Um and oh, there's information control where they tell you like cancel culture basically. You can't listen to this person, you can't listen to that person, you can only listen to other trans people and stuff. Like no Buck Angel even though he's trans because he doesn't go with the exact narrative. Like very much information control. And then there's the social control where they the isolation where they take you away from your family and your friend group, like, and they by telling you that they want you dead, like literally, like saying everyone who does not affirm you wants you dead. They would
Mm.
rather have a dead son than a daughter or whatever it is. um so yeah, it's all of that, like all of these things in the bite model are happening in the trans community.
Mm. And in fact, some of the relationships that you got into, you reflect on were quite abusive in that way because you kind of felt that they were almost sucking you in and doing, you think you can see now that they were kind of abusive in that.
Oh yeah.
Some of them were also quite old for getting a young person, um, almost. And I think that's one of the things about being a child of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
um, it makes you very vulnerable to repeat patterns, and you'll almost seek out further abusive relationships because
Oh
it's a very
yeah.
comfortable place to exist
Oh
if
yeah,
you
we search for the love we're used to and comfortable with, and
right,
familiarity is comfortable, you know.
right,
I used to just think I was unlucky, but it really does make sense, how abuse can be a pattern.
right. So you find yourself thrown into a new territory now, right? You've come from this cult into a new world, which is a new beginning that you're trying to map out for yourself. And I know that you've got a relationship, which is fantastic. Have you got I mean, I'm obviously thinking about this. You found yourself in Twitter getting a big following. You're now existing on the sort of on some level in the gender critical world as opposed to the the other side. What has your kind of life been like now, processing your feelings within that space?
I mean, it's definitely good to be out of denial. That's healthier, you know. And I have been finding a lot of support, which is good, as well as people who need support. And I think it's good to give, you know, even when you're hurting, because it kind of takes you out of yourself. So that helps. And the other D-trans people I've met are just amazing, and they have been such a big help, and they're such wise, experienced people, and they're people with the ability to admit that they were wrong, you know, like that's amazing. So I've met some really quality people, as well as been trashed on a lot and lost a lot of old friends that were in Florida and stuff. But you know, I moved away to start a new life when I left my partner down there. So you know, I guess I'm okay with it. There's a lot of grief as far as, you know, losing everything and everyone. Like I really thought that these people loved me. And I know that's, you know, because of the love bombing and manipulation, and also just because of my personality disorder. Like I'm very vulnerable and gullible, and like I'm just pretty easy to trick. um and
Right.
so like that just really hurts. And like so there's this concept called splitting that happens in borderline personality, where you go from black to white or white to black.
Yeah.
And without getting too much into that, I'm really having a hard time not splitting on doctors.
Right.
Like, for the longest time, they were in the complete good category, where I saw them as gods, like
Mhm.
all good, could do no wrong, complete trust. And now, like, I'm really fighting a split where I'm feeling the opposite. I'm like, they're all just out for money. They're all just evil. They don't care. Like none
Mhm.
of them, you know. So like, there's a lot of mental struggle going on, but like I am coping.
No, no, I mean, why wouldn't you think that? I mean, it's entirely understandable. Um, do you have any women in your life, apart from the detransition women, do you have any sort of strong female role models or a community of women at all?
I just started going to school in person this semester, so I am meeting more women, but the one woman in my life that's like really strong and amazing is my grandmother. And she actually had a double mastectomy due to breast cancer, and so she is really understanding about how I feel about how not having breasts. And she's really kind and really strong, and she's also dealt with pretty severe major depression too, so she's very empathetic and very loving. But she's like the one.
Right. And is she supporting you quite a bit?
Oh
Um,
yeah, oh yeah. She apparently never really believed that I was trans either, but she was terrified for my life. Like um you know, and my parents confided in them, like her and my grandfather, and told them about how bad it was, and I did too, so I'm sure they were just terrified, but she apparently never believed in it and is really happy I'm detransitioning.
mhm. And you don't have any contact with your parents particularly?
I do talk to them a little bit on the phone. I haven't seen them in person in like 5 years. But in the last like less than a year, we've been talking on the phone.
Mm. And tell me about what medical sort of stuff is going on, and went on. What sort of impact has the transition? Because obviously, you ended up having this mastectomy. You had all of these drugs which impacted on your body. you know, what do you want people to know about in terms of the medical harms that took place on your body?
A really important one is that like my neck and shoulders and usually my back burn all of the time. My neck and shoulders constantly and usually my back. And I think it's because I'm disproportionate. Like my frame cannot support how much my shoulders grew and I have throat pain and like it hurts to raise my voice because things grew outside of what there's room for.
Because you're a singer,
Um
aren't you?
I was, yes.
Right. And that has the testosterone has changed your voice to some extent.
Yes, completely. Like
In your
I,
singing voice. It doesn't sound it in your spoken voice, but in your singing voice, perhaps.
yeah, I mean, my spoken voice has actually changed too. It was a lot higher pitched. Like I was a like soprano operatic singer.
Right.
So but yeah, like and also I've lost a lot of volume, which is interesting. Like I cannot scream. I can't make loud noise when I cry. Um yeah, I've lost a lot of volume, which is kind of scary.
Right. And what else? Because I know that you've had some reproductive sort of issues.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm fertile. Um, I've just started my period again pretty recently, but they aren't normal and they're quite painful. I've never had a normal period though, which also impacts the fertility thing because of the eating disorder. So I don't know like what a normal regular every month period is like, but it's back whenever it wants to be.
Mm.
But I've had atrophy down there as well. So like basically when you don't use something or work something out, which the estrogen makes your lady parts move and work and all of that, they atrophy if you don't move them, like the same as a person who's in a wheelchair not using their legs at all, the legs get really skinny.
Mm.
It's basically the same thing except it's my vagina.
Yeah, you've become a menopausal woman essentially at the age of 22, is it that you are 20?
Yeah, actually, and I want to make a point about this too because it's important. There's actually no medical codes for detrans people. So my doctor put me as severe acute atrophic vaginitis or menopausal atrophic vaginitis.
Right,
Yeah, like that's the closest thing they could find.
right. And um yeah, and in the States, did you change? I mean, I don't know what it's like in the States in terms of your getting a changing your identity. Do you have because obviously over here we have um a gender recognition certificate where people can officially change their sex on documentation, but I don't know what it's like in America, whether or not you, because over here you get stuck and you can't go back without going through the same process again. I don't know what it's like in the States, whether you can just change your name
Um,
again or
yeah, basically you just do the same exact thing.
right.
Because and like when I changed it on my driver's license, I didn't have to do anything legal with that. They just did it based on looks. So I plan on going back when I need to like renew my tags or something and changing my license back to F. But as far as my name, like I have to go to the Secretary of State and like post it on the courthouse and like all of that. It's like a big deal and like pay a bunch of money for sure too. Um but I'm working on that. It's a lot of bureaucracy.
Right. I mean, what do you think parents can should do to equip themselves, or what would you like to see happen, because obviously there's a lot of us now in this kind of coming at it from a different perspective, um and I appreciate that there's some tensions, because I know that some detransitioners are not they feel that parents are how can I say this, a bit of a contamination, I suppose, to their, they don't want to hear what parents necessarily have got to say necessarily, because they feel, and I don't know whether this is because they're adults now and they feel that parents are some people that they've stepped away from. But what would you offer? What would you like to see parents do or say or learn, or what kind of messaging have you got?
Yeah, I totally welcome parents. I think they're great and really essential in this fight. And I would definitely go back to the cult thing and say learn about cults for sure. But also share detransitioner stories and experiences, because I had never even heard of detransitioners. Like I didn't even know it was an option until I just decided to do it and thought I was like the only one until I came onto Twitter, you know?
Mm,
So like I would share my videos, share other people's videos, especially not just like the interview videos that detransitioners do, but like the raw YouTube videos where they're just talking about things.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
ones are really, really. Everyone should subscribe to your channel. I'll put your channel in the underneath, so that you can follow your journey, because it's painful and important to watch
Thank
regularly.
you.
And I want you to know that when I watch them, and they make me quite tearful to watch. It's important to support you, and I am supporting you. I
Thank
want
you. That means a lot to
to
me.
know.
And I just want my voice to get out there so I can help other people, you know?
Mm,
Like I feel like that's the only good thing that can come out of all of this, you know?
mm,
It's awful that this happened, but if I can save one person, like I'll be okay.
mm. I think if I was to say anything to you, I would say that they, on the sort of gender critical side, and I actually hate that word. I'm just saying it in inverted commas, but there's a lot of love and experience, and guidance and support to be offered to you all. Um, so you know, be just be aware that we are here, and that they've all got a whole plethora of experiences, and so let them be there for you, because womanhood is a very crazy ongoing experience. That, and I say that as someone who's 53, and I only really just feel like I'm starting to crack it now. But
Yeah.
I have children who are the same age as you, and I'm still parenting and supporting them, even though they're adults, just
Yeah.
in a different way. So um just allow us to be there for you as well, and know that we are here to support you, and if there's anything that we can do, we will. So people will love to hear your story, Prisha, and I'm terribly grateful for you to come and share it today. And I know it's difficult, because I know you're not feeling your best, and I know you're possibly a bit worn down. Um, Having seen some of your recent videos, I know you said you're grieving for what's gone on, and I can see it in your face. So
Ah,
thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for giving all of us your time today.
thank you for listening.
That's all right. Take care.
You too.